All right, we've been talking about what are some things that churches ought to prioritize concerning church accounting, and so we reset our recording, and so we'll move with the next question. It has to do with 50C3 requirements. And so what I want to ask is, what are some key things to stay in compliance with 50C3 requirements?
Well, in today's political climate, one of the most important issues or requirements is political involvement. Okay, we want to make sure that churches manage that properly. No 501c3 organization is allowed to do extensive political involvement. And what I mean by that is you can support a political position or say for instance abortion rights, the right to life, or you can support the traditional definition of marriage, but you can't support a particular candidate. Okay, and so as your church moves, as we move into the political season, if you decide to allow for the debate of these things in your church, you need to make sure you open the invitation up to both sides. Okay, Democrats, Republicans, Independents. You need to invite all those involved, and if they choose not to attend, that's okay. You can't do anything about that. But you want to stay away from supporting a particular candidate. Okay, and especially with President Trump, we want to make sure that we remain respectful of his position and debate our concerns in a respectful manner. Okay. The other thing that churches want to be wary of is their finances.
Mm-hmm.
Private inurement, excess benefit transactions, those can get you in trouble. Okay, what that means is the IRS is very concerned about the assets of a nonprofit organization, and that includes churches, being abused by one person or one family. Okay, and so they have issues where they want to address conflict of interest. They want to address the large salaries that a lot of individuals who work for nonprofits get, bonuses, things of that nature. They want to make sure that no one person excessively benefits from public trust, because that's how nonprofits are viewed, as public trust. And even a church, they're concerned, that the finances are being used properly, because the tithes and offerings that your church receives comes from its congregants.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so they want to make sure that everything stays within the proper range. We always recommend that, for our church's payroll, that they stay between 30 and 40%. Okay, what that means is that 30 to 40% of the church's gross revenues can be allocated for payroll.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
mm-hmm.
And so that 30% would cover your total payroll liability for that year. Okay? And so as your tithes and offerings increases, you have more room to give raises and bonuses and things like that. But that's a good measure to keep everybody in order and also maintain some transparency.
As 50C3s, we're required in some ways to have audits. Speak to that issue of the requirements around audits.
Well, while there's no real requirement,
okay.
We do recommend that churches have financial statements prepared annually. It's just good business practice. It's hard to know what you want to do if you don't know what you've done, and so we recommend that you get annual financial statements done so that you can properly budget for the next year, and also when you're trying to borrow money from a bank or apply for a grant, you'll want to have those handy.
Mm-hmm. Many of you may know I work with the Baptist General Convention of Texas and San Antonio Baptist Association. And what I've experienced around 50C3 is that many organizations, particularly churches in our city, are part of the convention and the association, and they don't have individual 501c3s, but we're covered under that umbrella of those two organizations. And what I found here lately is that the issue is, if you're not giving to the convention or giving to the association, then your participation may be questionable as far as the organization is concerned. And I understand that the county tax assessors right now is having people to reapply for their 501c3 and their non-tax status, which involves the 501c3. So I would encourage you to make sure that you have a copy of your 501c3. You're in good standing with both SABA or whatever organization that you're covered under as far as your 501c3. So it'd be helpful to review that in that way. So moving away from 501c3, are there new tax laws that churches should be aware of, particularly coming into 2018? And is our political climate bringing new tax things and requirements that we might want to be aware of?
Well, that's the beautiful thing about being a church, is that we're pretty much immune to most of the things that the government wants to do. There are some things that do affect churches, or at least cause us to at least stand up and pay attention. But nothing that I would worry about. Jesus promised that the gates of hell would not prevail against his church, and so we don't have to be afraid of that. I think the best thing that any church can do is make sure you have a good set of bylaws. Mm-hmm. That way, no matter what change happens, what political decisions are made, your church is protected. Because in this country, we have a right to religious freedom. Okay, and those who would want to impose their personal beliefs or personal lifestyles on the church, they'll have to go through the bylaws to do it. Okay, and the best set of bylaws won't guarantee that you won't end up in court, but it makes sure that when you get to court, you walk out a winner. Okay, and so develop your good set of bylaws, make sure you follow them, and you should be okay. You should be
okay. What's a church setup? What could set a church up to be audited by the IRS? And
as a church, you're exempt from virtually every tax there's imaginable. On the local, state, and federal level, there are about 7 different agencies that tax businesses. Your church is exempt from franchise tax, sales and use tax, hotel tax, state unemployment tax, federal unemployment tax, property taxes, federal income taxes. Okay, there are a number. The only tax that your church is required to pay, or to at least pay attention to, is payroll taxes. Mm-hmm. As of 1984, the IRS required that anyone who works for a nonprofit organization has to have payroll taxes withheld from their compensation. Okay, and so if payroll tax is the one thing that you're required to get right, it sure would be a shame to get that one thing wrong. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so I would behoove every church to make sure that you handle your payroll properly. The IRS has instituted guidelines that determine whether a person is an employee or a contractor. And all we have to do is look at those guidelines. There's 3 basic things. If a church can control what will be done, how it will be done, and when it will be done, that person is supervised, and therefore they are an employee. And that's just a basic determiner, but most individuals that get paid by a church get paid as employees. Now, you will have some contractors in there, but just seek guidance. I would find someone who's knowledgeable to help you navigate those waters, and make sure that you operate in a manner that's decent and in order. But payroll is the number one way a church will get themselves audited.
Okay, thank you for your time. Let me just give you the floor just for a minute, so that you might express to all of us who lead churches, anything that we've not talked about that you think would be important for our churches to know.
For me, I was raised in the church, I was raised in the church, and for me, I would think that community outreach is the most important thing. Jesus said that he wanted his church to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Mm-hmm. And the most important thing we can do is work to spread God's kingdom in this world. And all you have to do is start off from where your church is located, from one stop sign to the next, and then you maybe spread to the block. Okay, and then maybe you spread and try to infiltrate more of that particular zip code. But you look at the needs that the community has, and then you figure out, how can our church position itself to meet those needs? Do we have what it takes? If we don't, can we get it? Okay, and that's what I would do. I would focus on community outreach. God did not inaugurate his ecclesia to sit around on Sundays and Wednesdays just looking at each other. Okay, he wanted us to go out, and he wants us to work. He said faith without works is dead, and so he wanted us to go out and work and try to love our neighbors and to help those who need help, the weakest among us, the widows, the orphans. There are so many different demographics within our community that are suffering, and so I think if we focus on community outreach, we'll maybe have a chance of getting to where God wants us to be as a church. But I think it all starts and ends with community outreach.
Well, James has given us our topic for the rest of our time together today, and I was just inspired by what he just said to talk to you about a disruptive innovation to reach the least of these. And so for the rest of our time together, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to practically sit down and say, what do we have to do and be to reach our community around us? So I want to say, James, thank you very much for coming and being with us. We appreciate capitalizing on this opportunity, and we'll let you know how things work out in the session beyond. Again, I've got cards for his company in the back, and if you really want somebody to help you out, go to Chestnut and Associates, and they'll do you well. Thank you very much for listening to us, and let's do some disruptive innovation thoughts as we leave this session. Thank you.